mixing a feeling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Tara Martini, along with the host, Becky McNattin. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
So, Tara, I want to start the show today with a little story.
Yes.
Recently, I was talking with a friend of mine who is telling me about an experience at work for her. And so she started with sharing the context of her life right now, how exhausted she's been recently, how she's been taking care of her parents, and then was sitting in this work meeting only to be completely put on the spot for not finishing a task that she had actually never been asked to do in the first place. Yeah, interesting. So she talked about what was said, how demeaning it was, and that the end result was her leaving the meeting so other people didn't see her cry. She spilled something on herself purposely in this meeting so she would have an excuse to leave the room and get some towels. And then she's saying this to me, and she said, all of a sudden, I'm sorry, this is stupid. Now I'm just complaining. I shouldn't be such a whiner. Compared to so many people, I have an amazing job. I get paid decent. I have solid hours that fit my life, and I need to focus on that. And in those few seconds of saying those couple statements, I saw every emotion that she had about the experience completely get shoved somewhere else. I didn't really even know what to say, whether I should validate her reframing to the situation or go back to the hard emotions that she'd started expressing. And totally real here, I wanted to go with her last statements, to focus on the positive, to think about all that her job is, to put the conflict in perspective that maybe things just weren't as bad as her emotions felt like they were in that moment. I wanted to praise her calm and cool-headedness in being able to completely rally behind a different way to look at the situation, and it highlighted for me. We use gratitude and reframing as an emotional weapon a lot. I do it a lot, and I'm guessing you do too.
We do. I do.
To myself.
I do.
And I would guess that there are many listeners who have had experiences in their own lives where gratitude is either something they are told to seek or they tell themselves to seek. So I want us to focus this whole show on the concept of weaponized gratitude, when the experience of being thankful becomes a subtle arrow of guilt aimed at stopping emotional processing. And I want us to explore what it is, where it happens, how to notice it, and certainly the impact that it has on our mental health. Tara, have you had experiences with weaponized gratitude?
100%. And I think if we all thought about it as listeners, we've all had those experiences. And I think the biggest thing for me is I don't think we or our audience understand what we're doing when we do that.
Right.
Right? Is that, and you just said it about 30 seconds ago, is that we are then invalidating the experience and the emotions that we're feeling. When we do that, where do those emotions go? And that's the hard thing, is that we feel like we're not allowed to feel the feels.
Right.
We must then feel gratitude.
Right. And although reframing can be a beautiful thing.
Yes,
and
absolutely. And we talk about that all the time with clients.
It can be super helpful to offer us perspective on things. But when do you feel a pressure to be grateful?
Oh,
like every day?
So much. So much. And I think, though, there are what you learn as whether it's you get older or life circumstances is there are moments where it's distinguishing between, is this a forced gratitude?
Yeah.
Or is this genuine? For example, this just happened this morning. I go and get lab work because I have to get infusions. I am a healthy person, but my infusions are in the cancer center. So when I sit for half a day, I'm surrounded by cancer patients. I leave there every day feeling gratitude. That is authentic, and that is pure gratitude, not forced.
Not forced. And we're going to talk about, I love that you bring that up, because we're going to talk about this difference between when we feel real gratitude about our experience, when there's this pressure to experience gratitude. Such an interesting topic. We're going to take a short commercial break, but come back when we talk about weaponized gratitude and questions you can ask yourself on the role this plays in your life. We'll be back in just a moment.
In a world full of strangers, you don't know that's right. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Tara Martini, along with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on gratitude as a relational weapon.
And we were talking about in the last segment, gratitude is an incredible concept and can be deeply healing in offering perspective. It has been linked to many positive effects on health and well-being. But what happens when gratitude becomes a pressure instead of a real feeling, as you and I were talking about just a few minutes ago? And it turns into an emotional and psychological demand. Forcing gratitude for ourselves and others can actually silence emotions like anger and sadness. Weaponized gratitude, listeners, is this twisting of thankfulness that invalidates pain, suppresses emotions, or promotes silence. People use it to avoid discomfort or challenging emotions. I do this. It's this pressure to be grateful while your needs go unspoken or unseen. Real gratitude doesn't force you to shrink or be silent. And that is something that I kind of try to challenge myself with. But Tara, I have some thoughts on how is the phrase "should be grateful" used as a tool to silence or look for compliance in relationships, maybe workplaces or society in general?
I will say that's one of the phrases that it was used probably like a week and a half ago. I was having a conversation with someone, and I said, wow, those were beautiful gifts that you gave these people.
Okay.
And the individual said, yeah, and they should be really grateful that they received them. And I was like, oh, the minute that you assign someone and demand that they be grateful, it takes the whole meaning of gratitude away. Because then I thought, wow, then it's almost like when you're gifting something, you're watching and waiting. And if they don't have the degree of gratitude that you expect them to have,
Right.
okay, well, that defeats the purpose. I have real issues with that because there should be no expectation. If you're doing anything, gratitude should come from a place where it's authentic. It's not something you're doing one thing to get someone to feel gratitude. It should just be a pure, independent, standalone thing.
Yeah, I love that
happens.
you said the word assign. That is a really powerful word to say, I'm telling you that there needs to be gratitude here. And if there's not,
Right.
There's going to be a relational consequence to this.
There is. And I think that's one of the facets of weaponizing it, right?
Right.
If you don't feel gratitude, there will be a consequence.
When do you think gratitude is used to avoid authentic feels?
I think so many times it is if someone is, and we all know people, it may be ourselves, but we all experience this all the time, is when someone is too fearful of being vulnerable or like fearful to go deep.
Yeah.
Well, the easiest thing to just say is full of gratitude. I'm grateful. Because that's accepted so easily.
Yes. I know that for me, I use gratitude probably as a weapon on myself to avoid authentic feelings when I feel like I might be burdening another person with my emotional experience, or when I tell myself I don't have the space to experience this feel right now. It's a way for me to kind of intellectualize it away.
I think also it is, and I will put us both on the spot, that we will both be having a bad day at the same time. And I will walk over to you and say, like, #grateful or #gratitude.
Right. Yes.
You know, that will use it in that ironic way of, and I think in a way that's also weaponizing it, right?
It is. It is coping, but it is weaponizing
right.
it. Yeah.
And you can do both. There can be the and.
Yeah. So we have some questions that people could ask themselves on the role of weaponized gratitude in your relationships with yourself and others. Tara, ask us the questions.
Okay, here we go. Where is the gratitude coming from? Is it from me or someone else? Is it
Again, like that assigned part
yes.
that you were just mentioning.
Yes. Is the expectation of gratitude And that's the expectation, that assigned or expectation coming from genuine feelings or from a place of avoiding conflict or to keep the peace. What happens in my body when I say it? Wow.
Yeah, we don't necessarily think about that.
And how many times do we say that to our clients? I just said that. I've said it multiple times already this week. When they'll make a statement, and I'll always instantly say, how did you feel when you just said that?
Yeah.
Because then that can help them, if they don't know how they feel about a decision to make or something, ask them how their body felt. It's the same here about gratitude.
Right.
Do I experience tightness, numbness, dread, like something has closed off? Or the opposite, does it provide openness and relief?
Yeah. And are we even noticing that is a really good point that you said when you sort of challenge people. Do we even notice that it felt like something closed off?
Right. But now audience members are going to go, well, now I'm going to start paying attention.
Yeah. As soon as you mention something or someone mentions something to you about gratitude, notice what's happening in your body.
Am I using gratitude to bypass anger and pain?
I do this frequently. As we just said,
I know.
And sometimes that sarcasm is a great tool. We've talked about this a lot on the show. We did a whole show on masking even, that if we can say, I'm going to come back to it, sometimes we have to do what we have to do to get through a moment.
Yeah.
But is it a way to deny ourselves the experience of pain and anger? I think I fall into this category frequently.
I do think it is. Am I telling myself I should be grateful? Okay, how many times do we do that?
Yeah, right.
I also think it's to give people grace who are listening, is that it is also okay at times to say, you know what? I don't feel grateful for anything right now in this moment because life feels too big. Or my loss feels too big, or my challenges feel too big. You don't have to be full of gratitude all the time.
Right.
Give yourself some grace. Who benefits from me being grateful? Is it my own healing or to make someone feel comfortable?
Yeah, and we can sense this immediately.
Oh, yes. Yep. I feel like we need to print these questions and then just carry them everywhere.
Yeah.
I start asking them to myself. If no one else heard my answer, would I still feel grateful for this?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, can I hold sincere gratitude alongside experiences of struggle? Just like I kind of brought up momentarily. Not erasing emotions, but letting these exist at the same time.
I love that.
I love it. Well, it's what we always talk about, the and.
Yeah.
Right? Two things can exist at the same time. And am I allowed to feel sad, angry, resentful while also being thankful? It isn't a this or that.
Yep.
You can have the and there. And I think that's so important, especially when, like I said, you're just overcome with, life. So, what do we think about all these questions?
Well, do I feel an expectation to be grateful? And does that expectation still allow me to be human? I think is part of what we're getting at here, which would be the and of it's not, am I grateful or I have these emotions?
Right.
Can they coexist at the exact same time? Or am I using gratitude as a tool? So we have some scenarios of when we might weaponize gratitude. There's several of them that you and I have come up with. Tell us the first one.
So the first one, the at least workplace. I love the title so much.
Maybe everybody's worked at a place called the at least workplace.
And you just made a lot of people giggle. Management ignores concerns from employees and says things like, you need to be grateful you have a job.
Have you ever experienced this?
Yes. At one of my last places of employment.
I think this happens frequently where people want you to be grateful for what is, especially if you try to bring up a concern or a thought, maybe a space of improvement that it's heard from a spot of like, well, but you do have all of these things. At least you have, which is why we called it the At Least Workplace.
My example, I am going to throw it out there.
Okay.
Because I won't name specifics. Perfect example of this is many people had voiced concerns about things, needs and holes and things. And the response from management or administration was, you need to be grateful for the job you have here. And if you want to leave, go for it, because there's a line of people outside waiting to take your spot.
Okay, yeah, which also is used a lot in, there's so many people who would want to be you.
Yes, and we all sat back and were like, well, we are kind of trapped because we know that that's a fact. We were in a hot spot. But they just kept with, you should be so grateful you're here.
Yeah.
And what that did to morale.
Yeah.
Right? This weaponizing gratitude in a workplace, so difficult.
Yeah.
And can have such a huge impact.
And, so then outside of the workplace,
yes,
we have another scenario called the martyr partner.
Yes, girl, we do.
Where a partner who does the bare minimum.
Because we don't know any relationship.
Helps
in the
very
world,
little,
listeners.
but expects intense gratitude for their contributions. So an example of this, a very quick one, is a person mows the lawn and then asks for constant feedback about how amazing the lawn looks when your perception is that they don't really help with anything else.
But that lawn looks real good.
Yes.
There's no listener that can relate to that. And then we have self-silencing.
Yeah.
Individuals who suppress their own emotions and distress by telling themselves that they don't have a right to feel what they feel, that other people have it worse. And it's just that idea of we just invalidate our own feelings.
Yeah. This would be what my friend was at the beginning of this whole episode, really, which is what caused me to think about weaponized gratitude.
Yep.
That in the instant, and it was so fast, of as soon as she was started to say a hardship at work, it was quit itself. You really don't have it that bad.
Which is so damaging because she deserves to be in that moment and just feel ick. Like, it's okay to do that.
Right. And then we have the shoulding parent.
I love the name.
And this doesn't necessarily mean parent. This could be any authority figure who shuts down emotions or needs by saying, you should be grateful for everything I have done for you. And this was a little like what your workplace also did in the At Least Workplace.
Yeah.
So this can be anyone in a power position. Like I said, does not have to be a caregiver or a parent. Power position over someone else. And years ago, a friend of mine, it was such a funny story we could laugh about after the fact.
I was going to say, right away, that's impressive.
No, not when it happened. So a friend of mine went to a manager about being overlooked for a promotion that she'd applied for. And she was mostly just looking for feedback on why did I not get it.
Which is
maybe
good
even
skill.
Constructive feedback.
Yeah.
Yes. And instead of being able to share the disappointment she had about the experience and the not being chosen for the promotion, her manager started to talk about all the times that my friend had been offered things at work, including snacks, like Thursday snack day or something. There was no space for the current challenge. And after a while in the conversation, the manager said, "This was a great discussion. I'm so glad you value everything I've helped you with." Which gets at that you should be grateful. There isn't space for your disappointment or betrayal or sadness here. This is only, you ought to know all that I've done for you.
Even Snack Thursday.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Then we have performative kindness. A person performs unwanted help, then keeps a mental tally of these favors to make the recipient feel indebted or obligated to comply with future requests. Oh, and we all know people that do this. It's the idea of where people pull in favors because of the things they've done for you. Like, oh, well, I did this one thing for you, so now it's time.
Yes.
Yep.
That you never asked them to.
Correct.
But then it's like that's where the weaponized gratitude.
Right.
You should be feeling really grateful to me and
Yes.
appreciative for me,
And
very
almost-
thankful
oh,
for what I
yes.
do.
Yes.
And so you should want to do this then. When there probably are times where we sit with, but I didn't ask you to do that. And now I have to do this for you?
You did that voluntarily. Wait, what? Wait, you didn't. This
Yes.
was a plot.
Okay, and then we have the guilter. Someone who immediately responds to an emotional expression with a reminder of what someone ought to be thinking about instead. And I have so many examples of this. I was just talking with someone who shared with me about this really minor car accident that they had been involved in. And they were talking to someone in their life who said, you shouldn't be thinking about how hard this is. And they were talking about kind of insurance process, filing a claim, just like being late to work that day. And the person said, it could have been so much worse. Immediately, that is guilt of you ought to be thinking about something else instead. There
Right.
isn't space for whatever this is for you right now. Now, I have no idea if in that exchange the person knew they were weaponizing guilt,
Right.
but it was guilt, so which is why we call it the guilter. Then we have the emotional avoider, which I would guess every listener knows someone like this in their life. This is a person who uses gratitude to not have to hold a response or respond to heavy or uncomfortable emotional experiences for other people.
We talked about this a little in the first segment.
Yes, it changes up the discussion to something lighter or more positive. Years ago, I was sitting with someone talking about a massive disappointment in my life, and I had felt exceptionally betrayed by this individual. I could feel, as I was talking about this is years ago now, feel the person I was with getting uncomfortable. Like I could just sense it. Like the presence of me being sad was too heavy. And before they could respond with any validation about my emotions, they said, well, Becky, you have so many good things in your life. Maybe it would be helpful to talk about those. And the conversation then shifted really fast.
Okay.
Conversation shifted to all sorts of things that had nothing to do with my feelings that I had shared, because we started talking about the things that were good in my life. It felt like I was doing this just so the other person could feel better, which is why we call it the emotional avoider. I'm talking about the good parts of my life that I'm grateful for, which were true.
Right.
But I'm talking about that because it's not okay for you to talk about what's hard for me.
Yep. Wow. Yes.
And then our last one.
The performer. When people feel obligated to appear thankful, even in situations where their needs aren't being met. So true. So, an example. You could say, as a new mom, how many of us hear things like, a million times, cherish this moment.
Yeah.
How fast it will go. And then we're just supposed to ignore our exhaustion. We pretend to the world that we just love every minute of parenting because it's so beautiful and perfect. Because we worry about the judgment we might receive if we, God forbid, tell everybody the truth.
Yep.
We feel guilty about the emotions connected to anything except enjoying being a new parent.
Yeah. And we've probably all been the performer.
Yep.
Where we have to deny those emotions that we have because we feel like we're supposed to be a certain way to the world.
Yes.
And maybe even not grateful enough if we feel anything else but 100% gratitude. So it can happen all sorts of places. I wanted to just quickly highlight where weaponized gratitude can occur. And we use some scenarios here and examples to really say this is pervasive. But from personal relationships to workplaces to society and systems, in relationships, people may self-censor emotions by weaponizing gratitude against themselves, because we do have a personal relationship with us in addition to other people. And we might tell ourselves that we aren't allowed certain feelings or really should focus on a positive aspect, like we just mentioned. In workplaces, sometimes workplaces can use gratitude to justify overwork or being underpaid. People might be encouraged to focus on workplace perks, like those Thursday snacks, while enduring negative environments. Like, hey, don't look at the morale, everybody. Be grateful for all of these things. And then, very broadly, society and systems, marginalized communities are often told to be grateful for incremental progress rather than demanding equity. And it can substitute gratitude for justice even, while inequality continues.
Wow.
Tell us about some of the mental health impacts, Tara.
Oh my goodness. Sadly, there's so many.
A lot.
There's a lot.
And maybe even some that we don't notice.
Oh, for sure.
Because we'd have to pay, as you and I were talking about, where do you feel in your body? We'd have to pay attention to the impact.
Well, and it's also one of those, too, where when we do it, how often do we really think, well, what did I just do? Right?
Yeah.
I literally did it when we walked into the office. I shared something with you about 20 minutes ago, and then I went, could be worse. And you looked at me and you went, this is what we're talking about today.
Yes.
And by doing that, I mean, I'm literally doing what one of the impacts of mental health is. I'm invalidating my pain.
Yes.
By just going, could be worse. Just put everything else in a little pocket.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about that impact to mental health is it's true. It could be worse. So our brain does this fascinating thing about invalidating real pain by highlighting what's true. And then we get ourselves behind that saying, well, if it could be worse, then I'm not owed the pain.
Correct. Yep.
Which I can imagine if we do this over and over and over again. You and I are huge believers that feelings and emotions are stored somewhere. That if we invalidate real pain, as you did just recently, that stayed somewhere.
Well, and think about then the harm that does, right? As it gathers in your body.
Yes.
Right? So it creates emotional harm. It invalidates the real pain. You're suppressing those emotions, like the anger, the sadness, the regret. So it keeps going down. And then that can get to a point where you're so used to not expressing those emotions, it leads to that emotional isolation where you're just not sharing, right?
Yep.
And also, it can also lead to just absolute isolation as well, where you're just socially as well.
Yeah.
Fosters comparison to others at the expense of ourselves.
Totally.
Which, oh my goodness, I think we all do that. And cultivates dynamics where having needs is seen as ungrateful.
Yeah, in that either or
Yep.
of we're either grateful or we're not grateful. And that experience of emotional expression or heavy feels I could totally see how that would become inextricably linked to not being grateful.
Right. But we talked about earlier in the segment is you can have the and.
You can have the end.
You can have the big feelings. You can have the anger and sadness and regret and gratitude.
Yeah, and you said something a minute ago around the isolation, the emotional isolation. I could see where if we're never challenging ourselves to practice that vulnerability, we're also not growing the muscle on, one, acknowledging it to ourselves. So we might not even notice the weaponizing of gratitude on us. But we're not practicing sharing it or expressing it with other people. And that does take practice. Vulnerability does not come just super easy.
Right. No, it doesn't. I think, too, when I look at this list of, kind of highlighting how have we seen the impact on mental health as far as the gratitude. I remember on my grief journey, one person in particular who would always be like, well, we just have to look at what we're grateful for every single day. And that was kind of their way to cope.
Okay.
And I just remember one day being like, can we just not? Can we just for one day not?
Yeah.
And just be sad. And just be sad. And I noticed the long-term effect on that individual was almost like a prolonged grief. A delayed grief, really. Because I was actively grieving, and that person, just like we talked about how it's weaponized, was pushing down their negative emotions.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, but not acknowledging the anger, sadness, and grief.
Yeah.
So then it was so delayed. It came so much later.
That makes so much sense to me. And focusing on sadness doesn't mean in the totality there aren't also things you're grateful for. But in the moment, allowing yourself that this feel gets the primary focus.
And you can have both.
And you can have both. Well, that leads me to a math equation, and I'm not a math person.
Okay, when I saw the title of this segment, I was like, never thought I'd see those words on a paper.
Yes. So I wanted to offer our listeners something to ponder around the moments when gratitude becomes a tool to suppress emotions rather than highlight them. So gratitude actually highlights emotions. And you mentioned that at the beginning of this episode, rather than suppress them. I want people to really think about the questions I am about to ask. Maybe even write these down and truly reflect on the way they show up in your life. These are the questions. Are you reframing something after feeling the feel? Or are you reframing something in order to prove validity or space owed for a feel? And the reframing is the gratitude. We use gratitude. Are you offering or saying gratitude, thinking about it after feeling the feel, or are you using it in order to prove validity or space for a feel? And I have a simple math equation that I use myself to challenge me in not weaponizing gratitude to avoid feeling feelings. Feeling plus expression equals relief. Feeling plus expression equals relief. And I believe relief is required for reframing. So I see that as needed as a precursor. I tell myself that I can't have relief without having felt a feel first.
I agree.
Once I have done this, felt the emotion, and perhaps I'm in a space of relief, then I can frame it and meaning make all I want. So let me give that equation again. Feeling plus expression equals relief. Yet, society often thinks that reframing plus meaning making equals feeling. That we need to prove if our emotions are valid enough to process. We do it all the time. We have to reframe and meaning make about a situation before we get to feel anything, is that equation. And it has to make sense in order to allow the emotional experience. Thoughts on it?
Well, one, this is the first math problem I've been able to figure out and have it be easily understood by my brain.
It's not calculus.
No. It makes so much sense. And it is one of, oh my goodness, it is all the things, right? In that this may be very difficult for people.
Super.
A very difficult math problem in that you're asking me to feel and express.
Yep.
It might be very hard. But in the end, no matter what, you are going to feel relief, right? In that it may not be instantly, but the end result, the solution, is relief.
Yep.
100%, because how can you, if you reframe it, sometimes without the extra step, there's no relief, right? If you just have gratitude and you push it down, there's no relief. So in order to feel that, to feel lighter, to not set yourself up for these symptoms we talked about a few seconds ago, you have to have feeling and expression.
Yeah, and if we're really honest with ourselves about the role of gratitude then, because to me, gratitude can come from spaces of relief. But we then can see, oh my gosh, it could be this and it could be this, and I'm so thankful for where I'm at and what I have and what is. But if we are using that to say, well, if I can figure out anything that I ought to be grateful for or where gratitude is, then I shouldn't have the feel. That we are minimizing something. And I think reframing is awesome. It's perspective taking.
We talk about it all the time.
It has its place. Perhaps after, though, we have allowed an emotional experience. If we haven't had the emotional experience, and I guess that would be another question to say to our listeners, have you had a feel about this experience yet? Or the situation, have you noticed what the emotion is? If you've leapt to some sort of gratitude, and we gave any of the examples, that maybe gratitude has become a weapon. And it gets back to that question of, am I trying to prove validity or space owed for the feel? And you and I say all the time, feelings don't have to be facts.
No.
So some things we can do. Validate our emotions, which could be a whole show by itself, but acknowledging that gratitude and reframing can exist with anger, resentment, and sadness. They actually can be together.
They can. They absolutely can. The next one would be avoid comparisons, which is like, what?
Yeah.
In our society. Saying things like, could be worse. really might not be helpful in processing through how an experience applies to you personally. Having something be worse can sure offer perspective, but not at the cost of, again, then you're invalidating your own feelings and your own experience, which is not what we want.
Yeah, and that's all about, yes, the reality is that's true. It could be worse. It's an intellectualization. It doesn't mean what is still doesn't have an emotion connected to it.
Right. You can say both. You can say it could be worse, and I'm also feeling really awful right now.
Yes, and I would say to that, think about your use of the word should at all. To you or anyone around you, anytime we use the word should, we need to consider guilt included right along with this. It's one of the greatest guilt words. And so if in your head or verbally you're saying the word should, this may be a moment of weaponized gratitude because there's guilt associated.
I think that's like a huge takeaway from this episode. If anything, just like have listeners, how often do we use the word should? And the next time you do, just stop for a moment and think. Also, just think reframing your process instead of your content. So instead of saying things like, why aren't you more grateful? Consider asking yourself, what would be helpful right now to support that emotion?
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Love it, but I'm sorry. How many people actually do that?
It is an incredible challenge.
Exactly. So I think that is the point of like, oh my goodness, those are such beautiful words. What would be helpful right now to support the emotion? Such a good idea.
And maybe even we could back it up and just notice when you're saying to yourself, why aren't you more grateful? Notice the judgment or criticality. Consider the topic shift. Is gratitude a movement away from what you were thinking or feeling? Is gratitude a movement away from what you were thinking or feeling? If so, challenge yourself to stay in the moment with yourself or the other person who you're with. Weaponized gratitude often is bringing us away from the emotional experience we were having. Authentic gratitude is a moving into it.
Correct. Yep. Validate and then reframe, like we talked about earlier. Let the emotion take space before you move to think about the experience differently. I always kind of, if whether it's a math equation or just looking at, well, when do I do it? I look at like reframe, reflect. You know, it's at that time. It's not during the feeling. So feel it, express it, then reframe and reflect.
Yeah, well, as you say that, I think about the phrase that I say all the time, validation doesn't equal agreement. We've talked about this on the show. That maybe even weaponized gratitude is this way of saying, I have to agree with my emotion in order to allow myself to experience it. Or I have to agree with someone else's in order to allow them to experience it. That we can validate without having to highlight any of those other things.
Right. Absolutely.
So what do you think would be different in relationships if gratitude was not used as a weapon?
They'd be so gentle.
Right? Oh my, that's a beautiful way to describe it.
Thanks.
They would be, there would be an ease of sharing ourselves.
And there'd be more vulnerability then. Because there would be less guilt associated with it. People would feel more safe.
Yeah, you think about how often we might share more of what our experiences are. Is that when you say there would be more vulnerability, I have to think that we would wear our story more fully, probably more presently, and definitely more readily. If we felt like it was going to be held or supported or we could trust ourselves and other people to respond.
I love that, if it was being held. Yes.
Beautiful ways to describe it, because I do think that gratitude is incredibly healing. And we do need it. We probably will do a whole show on what it means to have gratitude.
Yes.
But only when it's authentic.
Yes.
But only when it's authentic. So much to think about here. We are headed to a commercial break, but when we come back, we will talk through listener questions all about weaponized gratitude. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
Find your people, then you'll find yourself. You gotta find the people. Express yourself.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And we actually are grateful. We've been talking about gratitude, but we're grateful to our listeners who have sent in questions about the ways that gratitude can be weaponized in relationships. And we've talked about relationships with ourselves and with other people. So we are thankful for you. One of our listeners said to us, if someone weaponizes gratitude toward me, what can I do? How do I respond? And I loved this question because so much of our show was about what is it? How does it impact us? As if we might be, as if we're receiving it. So what do we do when we have noticed this from someone else?
Such a good question. It is. I think the first thing, and let me know what your thoughts are. I think the first thing, it depends on who this person is in your life.
Good point. Yes.
Because as we said, weaponized gratitude can be in any facet of your life. So to me, I would respond differently if it was my boss versus my sister versus, a friend
neighbor
that I just started to get to know.
Yes.
Particularly if it's a colleague or, someone in the work environment.
Completely agree.
So I think it does depend on the environment and then the person.
Okay. And I would say to this listener, if someone weaponizes gratitude toward you, notice how it feels in the moment. Right away. Obviously, this person knows that it's occurred, or they're saying, from now on, if I notice this, you get some choices in the moment. Do you tell yourself, oh, this is what happened, and I want to say something back to the person, which I think is what you're referencing on who are they to me?
Right.
Do I set a boundary? Do I say something about this isn't helpful, or do I state what I need? We're kind of making those in-the-moment decisions based on who that person is to us. But I would say to this listener, you have some choices. You don't necessarily have to say anything to the person. How you respond could actually be just ending the discussion. But my challenge to this person would be, how do you acknowledge the feel that already still was for you? What are you doing for, we notice the weaponizing of the gratitude, and maybe holding the relationship accountable is something that we need to do. But still in the moment, I love the idea, and would love your thoughts, Tara. I love the idea of saying, well, what does this emotion still need from me? Before I get to what do I need from this relationship, or who is this person that I'm going to say something to later on? Because that has digressed from what was causing the feel to begin with. So if you end the conversation, I'm still thinking, your response might be just go along with it, or go with the flow, or choose to say, no, I need to talk about this thing right here, right now. Either way, though, asking yourself, what does this emotion need?
And when you answer that, I think it depends on, like we talked about, who that person is. If it is someone where you're like, you know what, the degree in which I felt that thing wasn't strong enough for me to have that voice, and the person is not significant enough for me to share that much vulnerability with.
Right.
You may not have to share anything with that person. You're making just that mental tally in your mind about, oh, that was used as a weapon. If, though, you assess how that made you feel, and it was rather strong, and that person means a lot, then that's where, then verbalize that and say, like, ooh, this is how I'm feeling after what you had said. Can we sit with this and discuss it?
Love that. End of our show already for today.
Yes.
Thank you for listening, everyone, this morning. Join us next week as we process the concept of selective empathy. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some will, some won't. I wanna